gramophone, I'd wind it round and round, and with a sharpish needle it made a cheerful sound. And then they amplified it, it was much louder then. And you sharpened fiber needles to make it soft again.
The Early Recordings Initiative, or ERI, was created here at the UC Santa Barbara Library to promote the preservation, access to, and appreciation of early sound recordings. Anyone working with phonograph cylinders knows that during its long lifespan, there were many format changes. Some cylinders were fragile, some were not. Today, some are extremely rare, and others are common. Knowing what's fragile and what's rare is important. Equally important is knowing your options to blaze cylinders, what best preserves them, what delivers the best sound, when it's okay to use period phonographs to play records, and when you shouldn't. John Levin is a private collector who is very familiar with this topic, having studied and played cylinder recordings for over 50 years. In 2015, he developed CPS-1, a system now in use at the UCSB Library to make archival cylinder transfers. Today, he's here to share his thoughts on playback options for cylinder recordings.
Sound archivists call records carriers for a reason. Records preserve and carry sonic experiences to us across a media and time divide. Using period phonographs, we can experience records the way they originally sounded, despite the decades in between. Or we can use modern audio technologies to hear things that the original artists and technicians never heard. I play cylinders both ways because both are wonderfully rewarding and interesting, but I decide between period and modern equipment with a sense of potential harm to records, combined with decisions about rarity, importance, and my sonic objectives. To make smart playback decisions, you need to understand and respond to what's going on in the grooves. Now, this gets a little technical, but the basics are important whether you're a new collector with a small cylinder collection or a sound archive with thousands of them. Cylinder grooves have no walls and are really shallow. The sound, analogous waveforms in the soft wax or hard celluloid, is at the bottom of these grooves, and these waveforms are tiny. Some of them are so small they border on the wavelength of visible light. That's one reason why lasers aren't the best way to play them. Now, the stylus tracking the groove is like a boulder, hurtling over these shapes. The accuracy of this movement translates into the fidelity of the playback, and if the stylus is unable to track the shapes, something has to give. If the carrier is soft wax, it gives easily, and the waveform is deformed. This happens with celluloid cylinders too. It just takes more plays. The shape of the stylus is important, of course, so it glides over the shapes of the grooves without scoring or cutting them. But there are other factors too, and most of them have to do with weight and mass. These factors apply to period machines as well as modern playback systems. I'm going to describe both technologies, starting with period machines. On period reproducers, there is obviously the weight or tracking force of the stylus. Then there is the weight of the entire assembly, including the so-called fishtail, the stylus bar, any linkage, and the weight of the diaphragm. Now, all of these add up to what's called moving mass, mass which gets moved up and down thousands of times a second. And since all that weight bears on the stylus, it needs to be kept low for accurate tracking and to minimize wear. So how is this different in modern cartridges? Actually, surprisingly little. Like a reproducer, cartridges have a stylus mounted on a bar, which is called a cantilever, and like a reproducer, it pivots. But at the other end of the bar, there is usually a magnet. The magnet, an adjacent fixed coil of wire, you see, basically replace the diaphragm found in a mechanical reproducer. Instead of generating vibrations that are amplified by a horn, the magnet's movement next to the coil generates a fluctuating electrical signal, or audio, that is amplified electronically. Now, because the moving mass of magnetic cartridges is much lower than that of a reproducer, you'd think that modern technology will not only do a better job of tracking those minute sound shapes in the grooves, they're also less likely to damage records. And you would be right. But it's not that simple. If you play vinyl, you're probably familiar with tracking force, that is, the weight bearing on the record's surface. But tracking force is only half the story. The other half is in the function of the surface area in contact with the record. Together they're called stylus pressure. And given the small surface area of modern stylus pressure can be very high. The recording pioneers were well aware of stylus pressure. To keep their heavy reproducers from trashing cylinders, they used big fat styli that distributed the weight over a large surface area. But today, we want much smaller, light styli that can get into the nooks and crannies at the bottom of the groove and pull out the best sound. Unfortunately, though, this much reduced surface area creates much higher stylus pressure. So high, in fact, that sometimes the stylus pressure of a modern cartridge is surprisingly close to that of early reproducers. So what does this mean in terms of cylinder playback? Well, if your goal is to maximize sound quality and minimize wear, you'll definitely want to use modern technology, that is, magnetic cartridges with digital tools for audio post-production like editing and restoration. Audio post-production is outside the scope of this program, so to stick with playback system options, currently there are only a few commercial options. One is a little cartridge you clamp into Edison phonographs. It's economical and it works, but it's not going to give you archival quality. And even if it did, your Edison transport doesn't due to speed deviation and motor vibration. Most importantly, though, even with magnetic cartridges, you have to be careful when playing wax cylinders. Too much tracking force or a stylus with the wrong geometry, and you can badly damage a cylinder, just like playing it on a period machine. If you're transferring brown wax records or 4-minute wax records, you need to be particularly careful about stylus size and tracking force. In terms of other modern playback systems, many have come and gone over the decades. Some make archival quality transfers like this one, others don't. In evaluating what is currently available, you'll need to be clear about your principal needs and clear about your budget. Some systems work quickly and are easy to use. Others take more time to use and require more skill. There will be questions about which cartridges to use, conventional or custom, as well as the optimal stylus sizes for different cylinder formats. Bear in mind that all modern systems are optimized to solve certain playback problems, and no system solves all of them. So you should focus on your needs and pick your battles. Are you more focused on transferring eccentric celluloid cylinders or early brown wax ones? Are all of your recordings on conventional cylinders, or do you have oddball formats like dictabelts or bell tainter cylinders? In terms of period machines, there are other considerations. As every owner of old phonographs knows, it's not hard to play cylinders badly. However, it takes some work to get a period machine to sound really good. And usually that means using a recently rebuilt reproducer. Rebuilt reproducers not only sound better, they're also easier on records. So be sure your diaphragm gaskets are supple, not hard, and that they're loose enough so the diaphragm breathes but doesn't buzz. All linkages should move freely, nothing should bind, and also, obviously, your stylus needs to be in good shape. Sapphires and diamonds seem indestructible, but they're not. They wear out, they chip, and then they cut. So, am I saying that with a properly rebuilt reproducer, you can play any cylinder on original equipment? Well, no. I mean, how many cylinders have you heard that are in unplayed condition? Almost none, right? The fact is, each play wears records, and just because you can't hear the difference one play makes doesn't mean there isn't incremental wear. Nevertheless, there is a solution to this. Let's say you come across a fairly common title in so-so condition. Should you play it on properly tuned original equipment? I say yes. Play it, enjoy it, take care of it for future collectors, and if it's black wax like this one, play it infrequently. But let's say you have a rare wax cylinder in excellent condition. What about that? I would suggest you think about its archival value, think of future archivists, and either leave it on the shelf or make a transfer of it for your own enjoyment. If it's a 4-minute wax cylinder like this one, I wouldn't play it at all because they wear so quickly. And what about a copy of a common title on brown wax? Well, I fooled you here. Most brown wax cylinders are not copies since they were usually made in small batches. So it's likely the cylinder you hold in your hand is a unique version, not a copy. Again, play it once to transfer it, or just enjoy it as a rare early collectible, possibly a unique piece of history. I hope this video has been helpful. I know it was a mouthful, so we've compiled some resources for you, including stylus information and a guide on various record formats and the safest way to play them. They're posted here for you to download. Enjoy your cylinder collection.
I hope this video has provided information that helps you better understand the basics of cylinder playback. With this information, you can make better choices about how to handle and enjoy recordings. There's a lot more general information about cylinders on the UCSB Library website. And if you want to learn more about the many cylinder formats made and how to identify them, I hope you will watch the companion video to this one available at this URL. Thanks for joining us today.
I had a little gramophone. I'd wind it round and round, and with a sharpish needle it made a cheerful sound. And then they amplified it, it was much louder then. And you sharpened fiber needles to make it soft again.